It's a bird. No, it's a dirty bird. No, it's Michael Penix.
Yo, what's cool and what's going on? I can't believe it. Michael Penix is now wearing the cape here for Atlanta. I didn't expect to see it this season, but with all the things going on here for the Atlanta Falcons, it was time. And we're going to go through this roster, talk about what they need to do, man. How do they get to the playoffs next season? How do they rework everything with the whole Kirk Cousins situation? Yeah, we got to talk about that. So we'll do a roster breakdown, get into the nitty gritties, then get into free agency strategy, which might be a little tight. So we got to temper our expectations. And then a mock draft, which is also going to be a little interesting. They only got 4 picks right now. Hopefully they get some comp picks. So let's talk about the roster and start off with the offensive line in the tackle room here, which is actually a pretty solid one. You've got Jake Matthews, a really reliable left tackle, good pass protector. And he's also solid sealing edges in the run game as well. He's not going to overpower dudes or anything like that, but he's solid. And then you got Caleb McGarry. And McGarry is kind of the opposite, right? He struggles at time of pass protection, especially at the beginning of the year with Caleb McGarry. It's funny. These past couple of seasons, at least, I don't know if it's just me watching him, but I feel like every single time at the beginning of the year, right out the gates, he struggles immensely in pass pro. And then as the season goes along, he irons out some of those things, and I don't see him getting his beat as often. I mean, he's a great run blocker. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's a phenomenal dude at mauling guys in the run game and sealing those edges and stuff like that. And there's one of the reasons, I mean, they run a lot of outside zone and Bijan Robinson finding those lanes to the outside. Like, it's incredible to watch for the Falcons. So I don't want to disregard what he brings to the table there. And I'm not saying you have to let go of Caleb McGarry. You certainly can find worse right tackles in the NFL than Caleb McGarry. Now, you do have to think about that. McGarry will be protecting Michael Penix's blind side. So that's going to be something that's a little worrying for me at times. But I do think you keep McGarry at least for another season. It wouldn't surprise me if they decide to extend him because they're going to have to lower his cap number. It's just what they're going to have to do, especially with where they're at right now. So I could certainly see an extension coming his way this offseason. If nothing else, like a 2-year extension very much would make a lot of sense for both sides of the argument. He'll get upfront money, and then it'll help them lower his cap number. But that's something you have to think about. Or do you go out in the draft and you draft a tackle for the future? That certainly is an option as well. Both of those are very much on the cards for this team. You got Storm Norton, who's a reliable backup swing tackle. I would like to keep him if possible. If nothing else, bring somebody in. But you're going to need a backup tackle because their tackle room is a little thin besides that, Brandon Parker or Tyrone Wheatley. In general, I think this tackle room is solid. It can get the job done. As I talk about, Matthews is under contract for the next, I believe, 3 seasons. McGarry is under contract for next season. So either investing in a mid-round pick, an early to mid-round pick to replace Caleb McGarry is going to be something they look at. And if they cut McGarry, then obviously it's a first-round type of need. But if they decide to extend him, then maybe you're looking at more of depth purposes. Let's go on to the interior of the offense line, where this is the one area they have a void because Drew Dahlman is a free agent. You got Ryan Neusel, who's been able to fill in for injuries with Drew Dahlman earlier in the season. And Neusel's fine. I think he's somebody you try to bring back, and he won't be expensive. But Drew Dahlman, I think, is going to get paid in free agency. He is one of the better run blockers in the NFL at the center position. Like, he can really get on the move and terrorize some guys. So I don't want to take away anything from Drew Dahlman. The one issue with Dahlman is I think he gets pushed back too often. He just struggles versus those bigger, stronger guys in pass pro. Also, his snapping is a little inconsistent too. So that's been something he's struggled with this season. Anyway, Dahlman is a good center. He's going to get paid, especially with the shortage of offensive linemen. And that's where I worry that they're not going to be able to pay Drew Dahlman. So my view on this is they're going to need a center. Between free agency, the draft, getting somebody in here is going to be a priority for me, especially, like I said, if Drew Dahlman is not around, which there's a good chance he is paid somewhere else because he's going to be able to cash in on the open market, I imagine. So we'll keep Ryan Neusel. I think that's important in free agency, and then we'll have to think about our options. Left and right guard, you got Matthew Bergeron. He's still a little bit of a project at this point. He's better than he was last season. I do see him getting beat. Same thing with Chris Lindstrom, who actually, uncanny, I think he's gotten beaten more in pass pro this season than I've seen him really. And other than maybe his rookie season going back to then, he has gotten beat this year at times. So that's why to lower his grade just a little bit. He is still one of the best premier guards in the NFL. So let's not take anything away from that. And he's also gone against some good competition. And we're talking about getting beat against guys like Chris Jones and whatnot throughout the season, which anybody gets beat on. But Chris Lindstrom's been very, very good from my eyes. and you got Matthew Bergeron. So both of these guys under contract. You got Kyle Hinton as your swing guard right now. They could use a little bit more depth besides Elijah Wilkerson and Kyle Hinton. So that's something where probably you bring in a veteran to go and be a backup in here. That's really the only thing that I would say for their guard position. My bigger need here is at the center position and making sure we fill that void if Drew Dahlman does end up walking. To the tight end position where things get very interesting because Kyle Pitts has not worked out. Let's just be real. He has not worked out. They're not even playing him as much, it seems like now. You got Charlie Warner, but this is a spot where it wouldn't be surprising if they throw a late round draft pick into getting a developmental tight end. I don't think they're paying Kyle Pitts next season. I mean, especially if he keeps playing like this. He's been unreliable and doing, what we all thought Kyle Pitts was going to be was a monstrous weapon. Well, he's really struggling in that department. And he's not really the greatest blocker or anything like that. So I fully expect them to be looking at tight end late in this draft, UDFA-wise. Certainly be looking at the future here because I expect them to not be... Hey, I wouldn't even be shocked if they end up moving on from Kyle Pitts and saving $10 million because right now that's fully on the books for them and they can't get out of that. So if a team says, hey, look, we'll go ahead and trade for him, give you a 5th round, 4th round pick for Kyle Pitts, I would consider taking it at this point. I know it's a sunk cost. It's a number 4 overall pick that you're losing out on at this point, but it kind of is what it is. And Pitts just clearly, Zach Robinson hasn't been able to figure it out, and nobody, it seems like, can figure it out how to use Kyle Pitts. So maybe you can do what you can to trade him, get some sort of draft capital, and especially in this tight end class, you might be able to find somebody early day 3 with that pick who can come in and be a good backup behind Charlie Warner and then starting long haul. So that could be an option for this team. Hopefully Kyle Pitts, look, he did have a really good moment versus Washington this past week, had a game-tying touchdown there at the end from Michael Penix. But for right now, I would certainly say that I'm going to be looking to draft somebody late /UDFA pickup. On to the wide receiving core here. Drake London, Darnell Mooney have been a really good 1-2 punch and definitely one of the better 1-2 punches in the NFL right now. Now, the way they use these guys, too, they play a lot of 11 personnel. Drake London kind of plays a big slot a lot of times. They move these guys inside out. Darnell Mooney's been playing a lot on the outside. So they've got a very formidable 1-2 punch going into next season with both of these guys under contract. It's that number 3 guy. Now, I will say Ray McCloud has been pretty dang good this season, so I've been a little surprised by that. He's had a bit of resurgence here. Rondale Moore getting injured early August, I believe it was. Sucks. Man, it really does. But I expect Rondale Moore to be back with this team. You never know. We'll see what he ends up doing because he might get a bigger contract, a prove-it deal somewhere else. Teams are going to be looking for a guy, a gadget dude that can be a yak machine too. So Rondale Moore, we'll see what happens with him. Cordell Hodge, I expect him to be back. It wouldn't be expensive to bring him back as a cheap veteran. And he's been a nice, solid, 4th, 5th guy receiver for them. I would say that ideally you could draft somebody with where their draft picks are at right now. I'm not saying it's a huge priority, especially with other needs on this roster. And I think they're in a good position, at least with Drake London and Darnell Mooney. And then we move on to the running back room, which is one of the best running back rooms in the NFL. You got Bijan Robinson. He is unbelievable, man. Tyler Algier. Great 1-2 punch. It is. And you got Jace McClellan when he gets healthy next season. I'm excited to see what they have from him. I did like him coming out of Alabama. I liked his contact balance. And they got Avery Williams, good return man. Now he is a free agent. I think they could bring him back relatively inexpensive. So overall, I think this is a really good room. This is not something they need to address. We talk about the quarterback situation and things get interesting, and they get interesting quick because what do you do with Kirk Cousins and his contract, right? I think they're very much, look, Kirk Cousins is not going to go into the season saying, I want to be a backup, right? I think he wants to be a starter. So ultimately, with that no trade clause, they're going to either have to break that no trade clause and get with Kirk Cousins about that, which I think he's going to just say, release me at this point. And if they do that, they're going to have to figure out, do they want to post June 1st it? Do they want to just release him before the $10 million signing bonus or the bonus gets claused in? Because there is a bonus that hits somewhere before like the 5th day before the league year. So that's something they have to figure out. How do they want to do that with Kirk Cousins? Ultimately, though, Michael Penix, he's the franchise quarterback going forward. And I think that they are going to work Michael Penix and he is going to be the guy. So that to me is just figuring out what they want to do with Kirk Cousins. Michael Penix, in terms of how he's looked so far, in my opinion, he's looked pretty solid. Yes, he had that one bad interception this past week versus Washington. Maybe it's just a little bit of miscommunication, lack of experience with him and his receiving core. That could be chalked up to it as well. The one interception he threw versus the Giants was not his fault, in my opinion. overall, Michael Penix has looked good. He's had occasional misses with his accuracy. And as I talk about, those are just things as a rookie I think you're going to work through and get better at. I like Michael Penix, and what I've seen thus far, I'm really I think it's really promising. Had that game tying touchdown, a drive there versus the Washington Commanders, and if they would have gotten an opportunity, maybe they would end up winning that game, which unfortunately was a really tough loss at a critical point this season. But overall, Michael Penix being the franchise quarterback, I'm liking it. I really do. Going on to the defense side of the ball, start with the interior of the defensive line. And it all starts with Grady Jarrett, who's been a phenomenal player for them and throughout his time in this organization and for this team. He's been that dude, right? Now he has started to, his play is not, it's not prime Jarrett at this point. I don't want to take away how good he has been, though, and what he means for this team. However, here comes the money talk, right? And with where this team is at, they might have to get cheaper. They just have to get younger. Ruka Rororo, Zach Harrison, Brandon Dorless, those guys are going to have to step up. And I think that saving $16 million is certainly, at the end of the day, him and David Onyemata, they can save another $8 million on David Onyemata's contract. I think that makes a lot more sense in what more than likely they're going to do. What do they do with Grady Jarrett? Do they extend him and lower his cap number? That could be an option as well. But there's a lot of things they're going to have to really think about to get that number where they need to be, especially if they decide to release Kirk Cousins straight up. And not to mention, I mean, they're just low on cap space in general. So those are all things we're going to have to talk a little bit more about. But anyway, Grady Jarrett, he's been a phenomenal player for this team. And we're going to have to start thinking about some financial moves with where they're at, especially on this interior. And then in terms of nose tackle, you got Eddie Goldman, who's come back, kind of out of retirement, play for this team. I don't know if I expect him to be back or not. We'll see how that scenario works. You got Taquan Graham, who got unfortunately got injured here recently. So that's going to be something where I think they bring back Taquan Graham. He's not going to be super expensive to bring back. And he's been a nice rotational player for them on that interior defensive line. So they're going to need a little bit more like nose tackle beef in this, especially if they decide to move on from David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett. Like they're going to need to add a big dude in that interior defensive line. So that's kind of where I'm saying is going to be the big priority here for this team, is finding a big dude that can, be that one tech for this team. Let's go on to the edge position here, and Matthew Judon, Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie. That's been their main rotation of three. And you got D'Angelo Malone. You got some other guys working in there here and there. James Smith-Williams got injured early on this season. Khalid Kareem also, but is on the practice squad right now. Anyway, like Damone Harris, another guy they've been rotating in and out. This edge room needs help. It's the number one need on this roster, okay? And it has been for a very long time. Now, I will say Matthew Judon has turned it on a little bit of late. I mean, he's coming off probably one of his better games of the season versus the Commanders this past week. And that's, it's unfortunate, right? It's like we wanted to see this more earlier in the season, but it is what it is. Maybe they bring back Judon on a cheap deal, but it's going to have to be a cheap deal. Like, I'm not paying him more than like $3 to $4 million a season sort of scenario. But anyway, we'll see what happens with Matthew Judon. No matter what, though, they need to add pass rushers in the draft, free agency, whatever they can. Lorenzo Carter, he's going to be gone, I think, after this season. You got Arnold Ebiketie, who's been their best pass rusher. So get him some more opportunities. He's just not the starter, I think, just because with experience with Judon and Carter, they let those guys be the starters. But Ebiketie plays more snaps than Carter anyway. So this room, no matter how you shake it, they need to add upgrades. It is the number one need on this team. And then we move on to the linebacking room. And this is an area that ideally you could upgrade from. However, it's something that I don't think they're going to have a ton of resources to be able to do, especially draft capital-wise with some of the other needs on this roster. It will be challenging. I would love to add a dude who adds a little more coverage versatility into the room. But once again, we'll see what we can do. Nate Landman is one of my draft crushes. I love this guy coming out of Colorado, and I love his play style. Even here for the Atlanta Falcons, he just, man, I love the way he plays football. He's just not an athletic guy. He really cannot cover dudes, and that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I love the way he plays, though. Caden Ellis is a stud, around the line of scrimmage as a linebacker. This guy is a beast. He has really stepped up his game to another level this season. He's under contract for only one more year, though, so that's something. Maybe they extend him. I think that's something they'll have to work on next year. But for right now, you got Troy Anderson, who's unfortunately been a big miss for them. J.D. Bertrand's not been terrible. Okay, I think he could be a good rotational player for them. So between those three guys, Troy Anderson getting healthy next season, keep Landman. He shouldn't be expensive to bring back. I really don't think so. Overall, I would love to add, like I said, a coverage player, just not sure how much I'm going to be able to do to this room right now. Then we go on to the secondary, and we'll start off with the cornerbacks here. And A.J. Terrell's a beast, right? He is one of the better man coverage guys in the NFL. And they play a lot of zone. They've been playing a little bit more man lately. And A.J. Terrell, when you put him on your number one wide receiver, he can take away that number one wide receiver, and that's extremely valuable. A.J. Terrell's a beast. Let's not fool ourselves on that. He's under contract, which is great. And then Mike Hughes, who is a free agent, he's been actually pretty dang good, man. He's a really, really solid zone corner, and I think he's somebody that you can try to keep around and give him like a 2-year cheap deal. Like, he's one of those dudes that I think that you could bring in on like a couple years for like $4 or $5 million that wouldn't break the bank, and he's a solid number 2 cornerback. I mean, yeah, you could add somebody in here, and I think they need to, especially in the slot position, which is their biggest need, other than the edge position, probably on this roster, in my opinion, is finding a slot corner, because D. Alford has been getting targeted over and over and over again. They need upgrade there. They need to add a slot corner between free agency and the draft. That is my priority here in the secondary, because at least you got Clark Phillips. So I would suggest you bring back Mike Hughes. You have Clark Phillips, who's been a good rotational player with Mike Hughes. Obviously, you got A.J. Terrell. So those are your 3 outside corners. And then in the slot, Natron Brooks, keep an eye on him, because what he's shown in a limited sample size has been good. I'm just not really ready to bank on that full time as a starter, but at least give Brooks a chance for sure. I would love to say, hey, just let Brooks start this next game and see what you have with Brooks. So ultimately, that's what I would decide to do. And then D. Alford, you move on from, and you're going to need to add some more pieces here in that slot position to at least get competition. And then we move to the safety room here, which is going to be a question who's going to be that number 2 guy. That's really my only scenario here. And I do think it is a draft need, okay? Jesse Bates has been excellent. One of the best safeties in the NFL, no doubt about it. He's a ball hawk. He's a playmaker. He's a stud. So you got him in there. Richie Grant, though, I expect him to be gone after this season. DeMarco Helms is going to be coming back from injury next season, which will definitely be a nice boost for this team. And I certainly think he competes for the job. However, I don't feel like overly confident in that. And I do think they're going to need to add, whether that's a free agent, whether that's a draft pick, a combination of the two. Justin Simmons, I don't expect him to be back. And I don't want to say Justin Simmons is terrible. He's certainly not prime Justin Simmons or anything like that and whatnot. But I think that they're going to be looking to add here between the draft, free agency. That is something that I'm going to be looking to do, is adding at number 2 safety for the long haul. Let's go on to free agency here and start off with the team cuts. And this is where it does get very interesting. What do you do with Kirk Cousins? I decided to release him before he gets that $10 million bonus. So yes, it's going to hurt short term more, and you're going to have to restructure more this season in order to kind of fill for that cap, because you now lose $25 million by letting go of Kirk Cousins. I don't know if it's what they're going to do, but anyway, I think that could see them post-June 1sting it, and that's fine if they want to do that. Overall, though, I'm going to go ahead and decide we got to move on from Kirk Cousins. He'll probably want to play as a starter somewhere else and get a chance. But we are also going to have to let go of a couple of key pieces here. And Grady Jarrett, a franchise cornerstone for this team for so very long, let him go to a team maybe where he can be a Super Bowl contender right away and have that opportunity. But it's going to save $16.25 million for this cap, and then David Onyemata is going to save a little over $8 million, which kind of counteracts that loss from Kirk Cousins. That leads us into the restructures, which we're going to have to restructure some players. And a lot of these dudes are kind of like cornerstone players that we just have to, move a little bit of money to the future, which it is what it is. Chris Lindstrom, Jesse Bates, Jake Matthews, A.J. Terrell, we're all going to move that $12 to $13 million range, which saves us like $8 to $9 million for each player. And it gets us into an okay cap situation with $43.5 million to be able to re-sign some players and sign a couple of strategic free agents. Go on to the team re-signs here. And a lot of these guys are going to be depth players and whatnot, like Avery Williams, good special teamer. We keep him back. Punt, kick returner. Rondell Moore, give him a chance to prove it with coming back from injury. I think that makes a lot of sense. Cordell Hodge, good solid 4th, 5th receiver. Storm Norton, a great swing tackle. Want to keep him around as well. He has versatility left and right tackle, so he can be that 3rd tackle for this team. You got Kyle Hinton's going to be their swing guard. You got Ryan Newsel, who's going to be back, who can certainly fill in if, depending on what center we find in free agency, at least you got somebody who has some experience with this as a starting center for this team. And then we bring back our long snapper. You got to count for practice squad guys, some restricted that I didn't put out on here just because I couldn't quite fit them, etc. There's restricted guys that you bring back that'll fill out the roster, be practice squad guys, as I mentioned. And then we go on the defense side of the ball. Kavarius Street is a solid like pass rushing specialist, interior defense lineman. So go ahead and bring him back. Let that veteran in the room that they're going to need since we just let go of Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata. And then we also bring back Damone Harris. I do let go of Matthew Judon. Maybe they work out a deal with him on the cheap, but that's what it would have to be. I don't know how cheap he's going to go, and that's the thing. So I'm going to let him go. We'll look elsewhere in free agency. Lorenzo Carter, let him go. James Smith-Williams, I went ahead and let him go. I could see them bringing him back on the cheap. He wouldn't be expensive. Eddie Goldman, I just didn't bring him back mainly because I'm not sure if he's going to want to come back. Maybe he goes back to retirement. Who knows? So I didn't bank on that. Taquan Graham, I do want to bring him back, okay? Especially coming off injury. I don't think he'll be too expensive. He's a nice player on that interior defense line. Nate Landman, I'm not letting go of Nate Landman. As much as I love Nate Landman, they'll give him a 2-year deal. He's not going to break the bank either, so keep him around. Absolutely critical. Mike Hughes, I do want to bring him back. As I talked about, I don't think he'll be a super expensive signing. So getting him back on a 2-year deal, I think is an opposite pairing what they did Terrell, it's solid, right? You got your number 1 corner. Mike Hughes is a solid number 2 corner in the NFL and certainly can help out this, keep the secondary afloat. I think slot is the big area we have to address here. And then besides that, I do let go of Hamilton, Simmons, and Grant. And then going out to the outside signings here, starting off, and I will say this, we're going to have to lower our expectations. We're not going to be able to sign a whole ton of big name guys. And these are all 1-year deals. They're all going to be kind of like 1-year prove it deals because that's kind of where we're at with the cap situation, only having $15 million and some change to work with here. So we're bringing in, some LA guys, right? Coleman Shelton having some experience here, great gains, like Raheem Morris knows these guys. And I feel like, hey, making that connection a little bit in there is definitely very possible. But Coleman Shelton going to be our first signing here at center to fill in for Drew Dahlman, not able to pay him, but Shelton is a scrappy guy, okay? And I'm not saying he's going to be an elite dude. He's going to have his issues with his size. He's not the biggest guy, but like I talk about, he is scrappy. And you put him next to Lindstrom and Bergeron, I think it's a solid interior of that offensive line. Obviously, we got Newsel back as well. And Malcolm Kuntz has a lot of upside. He's coming off injury. He's going to be looking for a prove-it deal. Now, maybe he gets more like upwards of $5 million on a 1-year prove-it deal, maybe even $6 million, something like that. Who knows what he's going to get? So I budget in some flexibility between that restricted number as well. So that to be something to look out for. Maybe they give him like a $4 million up front and then they put a void year on it. That's what some teams do as well. So I could see them doing something like that to help them out in terms of that cap number. But Malcolm Kuntz makes a lot of sense. I think he's got a lot of upside. Like if you hit on Malcolm Kuntz, he could be a team's number 1 pass rusher for you. So I think adding Malcolm Kuntz as a day 1 impact guy, I'm still going to be looking to draft somebody, don't get me wrong, but he can add some more pass rush in here. I just feel like his upside, what he brings to the table, could be really rewarding for this team on a cheap contract and what he could be looking on a 1-year prove-it deal. And then we also add in Greg Gaines on that interior defense line to go along with Taquan Graham as that big nose, one shade on that defensive line. I think it makes sense. He's been a nice rotational player for Tampa Bay, and he was a nice rotational player for, even starter for the Rams going back a few years back. And then lastly, Benjamin St. Juste from the Washington Commanders. I think they're going to end up moving on from him. So we bring him in on a 1-year, $4 million deal. He can go back to playing the slot, which is where he played earlier on. I just don't think he has the speed for the outside, but you move him inside of the slot. He could be a nice big slot for this team and just help them out. And I'm still going to be looking to add a slot corner in the draft for the future, but at least St. Juste, starting experience, and he can hold up, right? He doesn't have to be this team's number 1 corner, right? Which is, what he's had to been for the Commanders. And then finally, we budget in $3 to $4 million for their draft picks. Now, I do want to say here real quick that they could have more draft picks depending on how the comp picks. If you let go of Matthew Judon, you could get a comp pick for that. So that's one thing to note. So I do want to point that out before we get into the draft. Speaking of which, before we get into the draft, let's highlight the needs once more. And with the offensive line, ideally, I would love to draft a tackle for the future or even a center. Like, they need some more help there. We'll see what we can do. No matter what, with the draft picks, I'm not going to add any comp picks just because it's a projection. I do think they'll end up earning at least 1 comp pick. Ultimately, I just don't know how that's all going to work out. And the mathematics behind those equations and everything like that is kind of complex at times too. But offensive line, I would love to add some depth. They really do need it. And then some long-term future ability with Caleb McGarry going to last year of his deal. Coleman Shelton, we only have on a 1-year deal. Same thing with Newsel. At least you have those 2 guys, though. And then wide receiver, they could add another weapon, but at least we brought back Rondell Moore. You got your 1-2 punch with London and Mooney, so it's not a top priority. I'll be looking at adding a tight end, maybe a mismatched tight end weapon to be that long-term Kyle Pitts replacement, because I just don't know if they're going to end up paying Kyle Pitts. We'll see how he looks next season, but if he keeps playing like this, I doubt they're going to pay him. And as I talked about, they could even move on from him. but before the draft, they could end up getting a draft pick for him. And then finally, besides that, I think they're in a good position elsewhere. I don't think you need to add a whole ton. And then on the defense side of the ball, this defensive line, I think is still the top priority, right? You got to add another edge rusher in here. Now, we did add Malcolm Kuntz in free agency, and he'll help out, no doubt about it, but it's a one-year deal. And then Arnold Ebiketie, he's going to get more chances to start here, which will be good. Braylon Trice coming back from injury. Those kind of be your main rotation of 3 at this point, so we definitely need to add some more edge help, and I will be looking at doing that. Interior defense line, yes, it's a little scary, of course, because you got a lot of youth, Rukaro, and then Brandon Dorlus, Zach Harrison, so hopefully some of that youth can step up. They're going to need them. Obviously, Taquan Graham, great gains on that interior as the one nose tech. I would love to add a little bit more there, but we'll see what we can do on that interior defensive line. I'm just really hoping that youth can step up. Cornerback position-wise, I think it just comes down to adding another slot because we don't really have anybody on a long-term deal. Benjamin St-Juste, Natron Brooks. Yes, that's something that's a good competition between those two guys and whatnot, but I still think we need to add some depth in this cornerback room, especially slot for the future. Linebacker-wise, as I talk about, I'd love to add somebody with some coverage ability. We'll see if we can do that. Safety is a big need as well. Like Demeco Helms, I like Helms, but is he more than is he a rotational player or is he a full-time starter? I'm still kind of on the fence there with that. Obviously, you got Jesse Bates, your number one. If nothing else, we need to add some depth to the safety room. My goodness, we're going with an edge rusher in the first round? Shocker, right? Mind-blowing. Mikael Williams, though, I think it makes so much sense. Keep him close to home. The Georgia Bulldog going to the Atlanta Falcons would be a dream pick for this team. They need an edge rusher with his talent, with his traits. It's just, Mikael Williams is a little raw, and I think he needs to work on his hands, getting off pass rushers more consistently. The talent, though, with Mikael Williams is there. So I'm taking a chance on him. As I talk about, at least we got him Malcolm Kuntz in free agency, so he can start right away with Arnold Ebiketie. Mikael Williams could be more of a third guy early on, and then long term, he can be that number one guy. Like, he has all that potential with the right development, all the tools he brings to the table, the athleticism profile. It's all there with Mikael Williams. So this is just one of those picks. It's self-explanatory. This is where things get a little interesting. You're saying, what is he doing here? Kevin Winston Jr., safety, Penn State. The reason why he falls is because of that injury. I think he would have gone in the first round if it weren't for the injury. He might still go in the first round with a good offseason, depending on how things, the medicals check out. I expect him to be fine. I think he's being cautious, to be honest with you, and just kind of sitting out, going to the NFL draft. He knew he wanted to go to the NFL, and that's fine. I understand that. So I'm not going to hold that against him. But Kevin Winston, in terms of just strictly as a prospect, as a player, he is a wrap-up tackler. He is an athletic machine. He's got great length. He's got playmaking instincts. He is a really good safety prospect. And I think you're getting a true first-round talent in the second round. And you pair him up with Jesse Bates in that back end, you're shoring up this secondary. And I will say this, if Jahdae Barron falls here, I'm going Jahdae Barron. Okay, then you plug him into the slot, but I just don't see him falling to this point. So I'm just kind of adding some more defensive back help. I could see adding more interior defense lineup or maybe a swing tackle. I just didn't like who's on the board at this point at the swing tackle position. So that's kind of what it is. Maybe Marcus Bowe makes it here. I don't know. I think he goes a little bit sooner. And then it's like you get into this conversation. Jonas Albanaia, I think he's more of a guard. And then you're talking about, Emory Jones. I think he's more of a guard at the next level. So maybe you go with a Charles Grant possibly, but maybe that's a little early depending on how he looks at the Senior Bowl. So that's why I went ahead and went BPA at the safety position. I just felt like it's the best available between Xavier Watts, Kevin Winston, Kamari Ramsey. Those are all guys that, at this value makes so much sense to me. So that's kind of where I went it up. That's my explanation for it. And Winston's a beast, man. You pair him up with Jesse Bates, like I said, I think that'd be the great combo. And then we go on to our fourth round pick here, Jalen Smith, cornerback, USC. This is an underrated cat. Watch out for this guy. He is an athletic guy. He's not maybe long speed. I don't think he's got crazy long speed or anything like that, but he can move. He's got some twitch to him, and he can cover, right? He can really cover guys, and that's exactly what they need in that slot position. He has experience in the slot. He played on the outside this season for USC as number 2. He was 19 last year as number-wise, but he is somebody that can play inside out, which I also like, right? If they need some more depth on the outside, so that helps them out in that regard, but it also helps them out in the slot because he's feisty, man. He can lay a hit too. He's one of the dudes that actually laid back Cam Scadaboo. So that's all I need to tell you, right? Okay, you go back to 2023, he laid out Cam Scadaboo and forced a fumble on him. It was a highlight reel play. Anyway, Jalen Smith going to be a really, really nice slot addition for this team and be a feisty guy who can certainly add in some coverage ability and some more run support in the slot, and gives you that versatility inside out. Final pick of the draft, one of my guys, Michael Trigg. I can't wait to see what he looks like at the combine. Hopefully he gets a combine invite or some sort of invite somewhere, because Michael Trigg has been actually really had a resurgence at Baylor this season. I'm curious how the NFL is going to see this guy. For me, though, I am a huge fan of Michael Trigg. He's going to be a great weapon and can be a great understudy here for Kyle Pitts. You draft him, he'll be their third tight end behind Charlie Warner. You let him develop for a season, and then if Kyle Pitts is still struggling or whatever, if you trade him, move on from him, you add in Michael Trigg here. I think it makes a ton of sense, and the way that this offense works as well, they like to use their tight ends more out and stuff like that in this 11 personnel, very heavy 11 personnel offense, so they're only using one tight end anyway. Michael Trigg would be a fantastic receiving option for this team. Can play, like I said, a big slot, can play like a hybrid role too for them on the line. Certainly adds another big weapon for this team. Michael Trigg, he's very, very good route runner too. He is deceptive, man. He's got some really, really nice plays he's made, one-handed grabs, you name it. Michael Trigg is a phenomenal player. I can't wait to see where he ends up going. So let's go ahead and recap everything up after the draft. Talk about coaching real quick. Terry Fontenot and GM as well. I do think Fontenot still gets an opportunity to be the GM here. I think he's going to really have to nail things this offseason, okay? Especially on the defense side of the ball, okay? It's time. Anyway, we'll see what happens with Fontenot. Maybe they move on from him. I expect them to slow play it. Arthur Blank's not the type to get really trigger happy, in my opinion. Same thing with coaching staff. I know Raheem Morris coming off that timeout and time management situation. It happens, okay? I'm not ready to bank on, or blank on it anyway. No puns out here, but Raheem Morris, I expect to be the coach next season. You got Zach Robinson heading to your number 2 as the OC. You got Jimmy Lake as the DC, who's really kind of, I think, been solid for them. So I think in general, they keep the coaching staff, keep the continuity, at least for one more season, see what you have. Now, recapping everything up and what we're able to do in this draft, starting with the offense side of the ball, we didn't add a whole ton in terms of the draft, right? Michael Trigg is that third tight end, giving them a little bit of depth and then future ability, depending on what happens with Kyle Pitts. I think it makes a lot of sense. And he'll also be like a receiver, big wide receiver for them too. So that's kind of also why I went after Michael Trigg, because he can also help them out as a receiver. He is a big receiver is really what he is. He's not really a tight end per se. He's not tons of, not really a dynamic blocker or anything, but he can block. Okay. He's a willing blocker. Offensive line is my biggest regret here. Of course, we were not able to do a whole ton. We add in Coleman Shelton and bring back Ryan Newsel. So that's really the biggest void here. And that comes down to a big question mark. How's that going to look, right? So I understand that we didn't get a developmental right tackle. We didn't get a developmental center. And maybe if they get a comp pick or two, then I would certainly be more open to that. And maybe you prioritize that over a safety or something like that. I just found out with a value. That's kind of what made sense to me. So let me know your thoughts on that. I totally understand feeling like they need to go after a developmental offense alignment for the future. That would make a lot of sense. Then on the defense side of the ball, this is where we prioritize things, right? Mikael Williams, going to be our first pick. You get him in here. Malcolm Kuntz in free agency. Arnold Ebiketie, Damone Harris getting healthy. D'Angelo Malone is a 5th guy, 6th guy, but Braylon Trice hopefully steps up in that regard. I think that would be a really solid edge room, and hopefully gets this room to more towards average, right? At least if they can be average. It's unbelievable. They've been bottom 3 now. It seems like the past 3 or 4 years, it's been bad for the Falcons. Interior defense line also going to be a little sketchy going into this season. A lot of youth, a lot of growing pains, I imagine, with Ruka Roro, Zach Harrison, Brennan Dorless. We'll see how all that works out. We do bring back Kavarius Street as a good situational pass rusher for them. And then Taquan Graham, Greg Gaines is that those big interior defensive linemen as those one shade, zero techs on that defensive line. Once again, I would have liked to have added, but it's just kind of with the way their draft picks are currently lying, it is tough. And I wanted to add some secondary pieces as well with Jalen Smith and then Kevin Winston Jr. I just felt like Winston was a great value for them. Him and Jesse Bates and Demeco Helms as that 1-2-3 combination at safety, that's going to be a really, really good group. Heck, play Helms in the box. I'm serious. Play him as a hybrid linebacker who can cover. I think that's what I would do in this scenario. Have Winston and Bates be your 2 high guys because they play plenty of 2 high coverages. And then Helms would play your box hybrid dime backer role for this team to go along with Ellis, Landman, and, Anderson we'll see, but JT Bertrand as a backup as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And then obviously Jalen Smith will compete in the slot with Natron Brooks and then with our signing Benjamin St. Jude. So that's going to do it here for the Atlanta Falcons. Let me know what you think. Agree or disagree. What would you do differently for this team? A very interesting rebuild, retooling, how this team has done things. Defense is the number one priority in my opinion, but obviously you still have to look at some offensive pieces for the future. So there's a lot of things to be looking at. I can't wait to see how Michael Penix continues to look here, and I love him, and I think he's going to be a really good quarterback. So anyway, I hope you guys have a cool day. My name is G Slang. I'm doing my thing, and I'll talk to you later.